had news a couple weeks ago that a House subcommittee on some appropriations redlined the RCORP funding. And everyone who's on this phone recognizes how important that funding is to rural Michigan, to rural America. We've made very good use of the money and bringing together all of you on consortiums, and you guys are the ones who are doing the work. We're just able to get the funding and push it out to you. So we are very vested in this, and I have worked with the firm Hall Render on some other projects to get funding put back in to have programs authorized and reauthorized. And I have the utmost confidence in Hall Render and specifically with Andrew and Abby. Andrew and I walked to DC quite a few times to get the state office program reauthorized. So with that, we know we have some work to do, and we want to provide some education on hopefully taking this back. And then, you know, Congress is in session, out of session right now. So if you wanted to schedule a meeting in district, that'd be great. And even when they go back, that's okay too, to schedule something either by Zoom or with their staffers. And that's what Andrew and Abby are going to provide education on. So that's enough talking by me. It's all yours, guys.
Great. Thank you, John. And thank you, everybody, for joining on an early Friday morning to talk about RCORP. Advocating on behalf of rural health and programs like RCORP is what Abby and I do. So we're really excited to see all these folks joining that kind of want to help us out, because you guys obviously are the local state connection, which makes such a big difference when congressional offices hear from folks like yourself. So we're excited to have this audience, and we have a PowerPoint presentation that we're going to briefly kind of walk through this morning and talk about just advocacy training, specifically on how to talk to these offices about the RCORP program. I am, by way of introduction, Andrew Coates. I've been working on behalf of NOSOR, National Organization of State Offices of Rural Health. I've been representing them at the federal level since, I think, 2015. And as John mentioned, we've been in many congressional offices. You name the state, we've probably been there, walked all over Capitol Hill together, and in that process have gotten the SOAR program reauthorized as a standalone bill, as we've gotten it passed into law on two separate occasions, both in 2018 and then last year in 2022, to really solidify the state office of rural health program. And we're hoping to kind of do something similar for RCORP, which we'll get into in a second. But before I talk too much, I'm going to introduce my colleague, Abby Carricker. Abby's been with Hall Render for quite a while now, so or is back with Hall Render. So Abby, why don't you do a brief intro?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Andrew, so much for the introduction, and thanks to the group for having us. I'm technically Andrew's sidekick, if you will, on these issues. And because rural health is such a issue he has passion on, and it's a good issue to advocate for on the Hill, I'm always begging him to get to work with him on the rural side. So by way of background, I've came to DC working for the Federal Trade Commission, and then joined Hall Render. And I actually just rejoined after a brief hiatus on what some folks in healthcare are calling the dark side, because I worked for the Federation of American Hospitals, representing the for-profit healthcare health systems. And there I did a lot of rural healthcare work as well. So looking forward to discussing this issue with you guys.
All right, thanks, Abby. Want to talk briefly about, and Abby, if you could push the next slide, just outlining what we're going to talk about today. Abby's going to provide an overview of kind of where Congress is. I think that's important when you meet with obviously a member or their staff to know kind of what they're dealing with. We're going to take a look at the appropriations outlook. John had mentioned the RCORP funding. We're going to talk about that, talk about what may happen this year and going forward. And then we'll get into the kind of the meat of why we're here, and that's tips on advocating on behalf of your organization about RCORP. So Abby, do you want to just give a 10,000-foot overview of kind of who's in control of Congress right now, what's going on, and just provide a brief overview of that?
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. I think that makes sense. And I know a lot of folks follow the craziness that is DC on the news and otherwise, but we wanted to give basically just an overall state of play for Congress, just so you can kind of know the atmosphere you're dealing with as we're working on your issues. Luckily, things have evened out quite a bit since it took 15 ballots to elect Kevin McCarthy as the House Speaker. And as shown by this kind of historic, crazy election, you can see that the House is being governed under very slim Republican margins. And we haven't really seen many controversial legislation passed via the House, as House Republicans are kind of focusing on what they can do unilaterally, which is like, focusing on oversight of the administration. So definitely, it has been a challenge, I know, for House leadership to kind of get their party kind of working on the same page, and we've seen that play out a little bit. But on the Senate side, we've seen the complete reverse of what's going on in the House, as the Senate has very narrow Democratic control, and it is split 50-50, which gives Vice President Harris the tie-breaking vote. And how we've seen this dynamic play out is that we've seen individual senators as basically having massive importance. So senators, sometimes some people say senators acting as presidents, because single senators alone are able to kind of control an agenda, go on the Sunday TV and kind of talk about what they agree with and what they don't agree with. And people are really following closely given the narrow margins. So really, kind of the whole point of this is just to say that for an item to get done in this Congress, it's got to be a consensus building item. The good news for this group is that in an atmosphere where healthcare is actually like getting hit with a lot of different attacks, and it's been quite a negative environment for a lot of different healthcare stakeholders, advancing rural healthcare and advancing rural healthcare agenda items seems to be a consensus builder across both parties, and is somewhere where they can find agreement and actually get something done in this split, really crazy, tight environment. So unless you have something to add, Andrew, we can talk about appropriations now.
No, I think that's well said. And I mean, as we look at the appropriations, it's very apparent. The House is controlled by Republicans. The Senate is Democrat control. And when they write their appropriations bills and pass them, at least at the committee level, which they did last month in July, it's obvious, who's controlling and writing these bills. That's why, who has control of each House and Senate is so important. You look at, here is the rural health funding for FY24. So that's the next fiscal year, which will start October 1 of this year, 2023. These are I think back to the old, when you took the SAT and you get like the first one or two questions was like ridiculously easy. So which one of these looks different than the other? Obviously, flex program, SOAR program, rural residency program, they all come in right around the same number, right? The House and Senate have appropriated in the same number. Massive gulf in difference. And when I see the House zeroing out RCORP, bright flashing red warning signs are going off in my head, because this is basically saying they're not fans of the program. Now, I have met with folks on the Senate side. They have basically said the Senate appropriations number will carry the day this year for RCORP. And given that Democrats will most likely be in control of the Senate next year, you can always have members flip and that changes over. That's happened in the past, but unlikely. I think RCORP should be okay next year. But again, Republicans are not, for various reasons, and they've given me a couple of reasons, they're not huge fans of the RCORP program right now. So it's incumbent on us to really start pounding home the importance of the program, and why this needs to be included in funding and potentially get included into statute so that it's continued funding and predictable funding. Because when you see that zero, that's a huge warning sign. And that's obviously why we're here today. Abby, next slide. So, what will happen with the funding? Technically, Congress is supposed to pass all the appropriations bills before September 30th, 2023. That never happens, and it's not going to happen this year. So you're going to get a massive kind of big year-end omnibus spending bill that includes everything in the kitchen sink in it. Usually it's sometime after Thanksgiving and before Christmas is when they deal with this. They'll pass a continuing resolution in September that extends FY23 funding for a couple months. And then at some point, they're going to have to put FY24 funding into place. You're going to have the House number, which is zero. You're going to have the Senate number, which is 155 million. The two, they're going to have to reconcile the differences, and they're going to have to come up with a single number for RCORP. Again, I've gotten assurances from staff. It's no guarantee, right? I shouldn't say assurances, but their belief is the Senate number will carry the day, as it tends to, and it's often happened in the past on rural health funding. But again, we are 1 or 2 members away from, if it was Republican-controlled Senate, Republican-controlled House, it might be a completely different story and risk of losing the program entirely. Abby, any thoughts just on omnibus? Did I state that well? Is that pretty much how you see it happening as well?
Yep. I mean, I think we've already made it clear that there's going to be a lot of political theater, and that short-term funding bill will get passed really close to September 30th just to up the drama. But I think you're right. We're going to have a massive year-end omnibus that kind of takes care of government funding.
Yeah. So, I mean, you'll hear a lot of stories. Is there going to be a shutdown, a federal shutdown? That almost rarely happens. I think parties have learned that it's not good politically for either side. So as much as divisive as it is up here, they tend to get something done. And I think they will right before Christmas. And I think funding should be okay. But again, we're going to there's a lot of work to be done as far as RCORP goes. The next slide, Abby.
Okay.
All right. So kind of why we're here. Let's talk about just requesting a meeting, because I think everyone on this call there's no reason you can't gain an audience with a congressional office. You are, for all intents and purposes, you're the board of directors for members of Congress, right? Now, maybe it's a big board of Congress, but you are their constituents. And having worked in a congressional office, when constituents call, when constituents want a meeting, a good congressional office will take that meeting or take that call. So there's a way to go about doing it. And Abby and I will try to kind of walk through that process. I think the first ask, if you're a director of your program, your organization, or you have a president of the hospital or organization or CEO level person that's willing to meet with the member of Congress, you can ask for a meeting with a member of Congress. The congressional offices tend to do, if it's a member level, they'll meet with kind of the CEO, president, executive director level. If it's more of a staffer, you tend to get meetings more with the staff. So let's say you're an organization and the head of the organization is willing to do this meeting. As John mentioned at the beginning of this, August is a perfect time to get an audience with a congressional office. Having, again, worked in their congressional office, I know members always say to staff or not, fill my schedule. I want to get back and meet with the constituents. So they're actively looking for their constituents to go meet with, to go do site visits. Doesn't have to be all day, just to stop in 30 minutes, an hour meeting a photo op for them so they can put on their social media. Was here back in the district or back in the state with X, Y, and Z, had a great talk about X, Y, and Z or RCORP funding. So I think your first ask should be have the member stop by your location for a site visit. If not August, then they have weeks off in September, October, November, just one in each month, but they'll be back in the state and district in those weeks as well. So you can ask for a meeting there. We're going to get into what the meeting ask should look like. But if they say no, and it's a big ask and you don't always get that, ask for a virtual meeting. There was not a lot of good things came out of COVID. One of them was virtual meetings. And members like doing them because they're quick, they're efficient, and it gets them, they can do a lot of different meetings in a short amount of time. So if they say no on the in-site visit, ask for the virtual. This meeting request will go through the member's scheduler. And the next slide Abby and I prepared has the contact information for each office's scheduler in Michigan. Abby, do you want to go to the next slide?
Yeah.
So you'll see here, and we've included, and we're going to send this all out after this presentation. Abby, you can go to the next slide as well. We have for the senators, for the representatives, we have their schedulers contact information. So their email, their phone number. I like email, I like getting it in writing. And just email these folks with the request. A scheduler is the gatekeeper to a member of Congress. They control who the person's going to meet with, when they're going to meet with them. So it's important to contact them and provide the necessary information about your organization, about what you want to meet about, and why the member should be meeting with you. So it's a pretty straightforward email request. Abby, if you go to the next slide, we kind of laid out, and now there's 1,000 ways to skin the cat here, but we laid out what we've done in the past. Again, we'll send this along via email. I don't need to necessarily read it, but let them know who you are. Let them know this is an ask for an insight, a tour of the facility, and discuss how we impact residents in the state and how this program impacts residents in the state. It's short and sweet. It doesn't need a ton of information. And then usually good schedulers will be back in touch within a week of your email, and they'll let you know, yes, he or she would be willing to meet, or no, fortunately they can't meet, but we may be able to do a virtual meeting, or no, they can't do either, but we could do a staff meeting, which we'll get to in a second. So next slide, Abby. All right, so if you get the no on the in-person, if you get the no on the virtual, the member doesn't want to meet. That happens a lot. They're really busy. They have groups from all over the state and country asking them for meetings all the time. They get probably hundreds of requests. So don't take offense. That happens to everybody. The next level down would be staff meeting. And oftentimes the scheduler will refer you to the staffer. If they don't, we have included the healthcare policy staffer for each Michigan office. You'll have to find out what district you're in. Or even if your organization represents multiple districts or serves constituents that are coming from multiple districts, you can then kind of feel free to reach out to a number of different members. But these, again, are the healthcare policy kind of experts. So they handle all things healthcare for these offices. And I would, again, email these. I would recommend email these staffers. And on the next slide, we have a kind of a sample email to the staffer. Having been a staffer, you're going to get a lot of emails. You get a lot of requests. Don't be afraid to be a squeaky wheel. If you don't hear back, remember I used to be like tentative. Oh, I got to wait a certain amount of time. Just keep, you don't want to overdo it, but keep sending emails, keep following up, and the squeaky wheel gets the grease. So they're not going to be offended if you send multiple emails and forwards or whatnot. Here's what a sample email looks like. Again, you can fashion this any way you want. For staff, you can let them know what it's going to be about. And we mentioned the RCORP program there. Next slide. All right, so let's say, first off, Abby, did I leave anything out on sending emails and following up and staffers and members and schedulers?
Nope. I was just going to pipe in that I think the squeaky wheel thing is the most important, because even folks we work with all the time, they're just like, sorry, these emails get buried. So
Right.
definitely keep bothering them. And also they're just extremely young sometimes. So they're like running around and have a lot on their plate too. So they don't mind being bothered.
So that's a good point. If and when you're meeting with these staffers, know that they're probably the average demographic, depending if it's House or Senate staff, late 20s, maybe early 30s. They tend to be largely overworked, underpaid. They handle a lot of different issues. So I think a lot of people go into these meetings thinking, oh, they're going to know everything about this. Most likely, unless it's a very seasoned healthcare policy staffer, they're not going to even know what the RCORP program is. They're going to be doing a Google search when you write them or before your meeting on what the program is. So don't assume they know everything about the program. You almost have to start at a very broad level, what it is, what it does, why it's important. So let's say we get the meeting. I know we're getting very short on time. Very quickly, detail who you are, what you do, and then get quickly into the program. We have statistics and happy to send them along on what our RCORP program does at a national level. Some of it's like big picture. It's been around since 2018. It's provided services to over 2 million rural individuals across the country, mat services to over 100,000 just in the past fiscal year. So detail the program, why it's important to your organization. I always say members love hearing stories, so individual constituents, how it's impacted certain families. Don't get too crazy with buried in statistics. I always say you remember the stories you read, or you used to when you read newspapers, and not the kind of the stock quotes or numbers from a newspaper. Make that connection. That's important. Abby, next slide. And then finally make the ask. And this is the most important thing. The first ask I would do is make sure funding stays where it is. 155 million in FY24 in the year-end spending bill. If it's a Senate, we applaud the Senate for the appropriations number for RCORP. We'd hope that the Senate takes up, or the Congress takes up the Senate number in the final bill that passes in the year-end omnibus. If it's a House member, you need to tell them that you're disappointed that the House did not fund the RCORP program and why it's important and why it should be funded. That's number one. Number two, and this is something that's near and dear to us because we're working on it at NOSOR, ask the office, are you looking to sponsor a good bipartisan rural healthcare bill? A lot of offices are. Offices love rural health. Impacts just about everyone. If they are and they say yes, or there's passing interest, say, we have a bill for you. We're looking to put the RCORP program into statute. So make it authorize it for 5 years. We're looking to get a bill introduced. So if you can meet with offices and you sense there's interest, email us, email John, let us know that there's interest and we will follow up immediately. That's part of the reason we're so excited to do this. There's a lot of members of Congress. You can only reach out to so many. We only have so much bandwidth. Having you guys help us on this is so important and so helpful to us. So pretty easy. First ask is continued funding. Second ask, are you looking to introduce or sponsor a rural healthcare bill? Next slide. And then briefly, just the final touch on a meeting. If you're meeting with a member, ask them, is there a staffer that I should follow up with directly via email? always obviously send a thank you note. It's a good way to kind of maintain that connection is through a thank you note. And then just stay on their radar. Send them forwards about what your organization is doing from time to time. Relevant articles. Just never be shy about sending emails. And finally, be persistent. Don't be afraid to be border on that line of annoyance. Staff get all sorts of emails. Don't be afraid to contact them. So that was brief. We kind of rushed through that. Abby, did I leave anything else out?
No, I don't think you did.
Great. Well, we're right near the top of the hour. Are there any questions from you guys? Anything, everything?
I have a question, Andrew.
Go ahead, John.
And Abby. So is there any value in meeting with a congressional staffer in the in-state district office? So for instance, Congressman Bergman has an office in Traverse City.
Mm-hmm.
Is it worth setting up a meeting with the staffer in Traverse City and having face-to-face time?
I absolutely think so. Now, the staffers in the district and in the state are more responsible for casework. So this is, I'm not getting my Social Security check, or there's an immigration issue, and they work directly with the agencies, but they're still there to serve you. So they can act as liaison, maybe loop into a call, the DC staffer, the policy staffer. And oftentimes that's the easiest meeting to get, is going through the local district office. So certainly don't be afraid to do that. I might start with our method, start with the member, start with the health policy staffer. If you strike out on both those, go to the district office. But that's a great point, John. Any other questions?
What
So
if you
just
have
look-
I was going to say, what if you had a personal connection with the local staffer? Would it be best to go right there since you actually have a relationship with that person? That
Yeah,
maybe...
no, if you have a personal connection, that's great. Just ask them, say, hey, this is a program that's really important to us. Is there a way we can get an audience with either your boss or the person who handles this issue out in DC? And then it's a slam dunk, right? They'll send an email and you're good to go.
So this is Dave. It seems like, John, maybe we need to get together and have 3 or 4 elevator speech bullet points to talk about how we've impacted the region, our accomplishments. I'm not sure if we want to get a subgroup together to do that, but I think that may be our next step as we're approaching getting together with these folks. I think we need to be in agreement on what exactly we're going to talk about.
I agree. So we might take a couple of the national statistics that Andrew has from the federal office and then weave in a couple of our own and then tell the story that we can of being in the schools with Narcan, talking to the pharmacists.
What's the timeline that I know you said August, but what's the timeline for the steps that you want to take?
Yeah, I mean, now is a great time as far as members are back in their districts, and in the fall they'll have weeks where they're back as well. But the sooner the better. Appropriations decisions will be made between probably now and Halloween, and usually things get baked in right around there. So, and then obviously we're going to be looking for a champion on introducing an RCORP bill as a standalone bill. So the sooner the better, I guess.
You had mentioned Narcan's in the schools. The schools need so much education. I was just there yesterday at our local school, answering a lot of questions about their controlled substances and how locking them up and stuff. They don't carry Narcan in the school, and they even asked me what the drug is there a lot of drugs in our community? They were clueless as to what is in our environment. And we are in one of the biggest drug populations in our entire surroundings. They need the education. They don't have it. And that is the school employees.
I think we can close this up, Andrew and Abby.
Okay.
I can let everyone know that, our footprint, covers 4 districts. So we have to make sure that we touch those districts and make sure we even, spend some time with Senator Stabenow and Peters. They are, our allies, but we also need to thank them for being our allies. And then Andrew and Abby have agreed to answer any follow-up questions you have. Send them an email. They're our friends on this, and they want this to succeed too.
Absolutely. Yeah, included with the presentation, we'll include our emails, and don't be shy. Any questions, let it fly. We're happy to help.
So John, will the RCORP team be pulling together the information and then sending that back out to us? Are you inviting us to another strategy meeting? What do you think the approach will be for that?
To David's point, I'd like to get the RCORP team together along with a couple of us, here in East Lansing, and work on that message, that elevator speech, and get that out to you sometime next week. And then, of course, we have a consortium meeting on the 8th, and we can also strategize, spend some time at that day, because as Andrew and Abby have said, this thing will be baked sometime in October. So if we can reconvene again on September 8th and get that message out to even more people, then that'll be helpful. And I know I see Lauren Mattis is on the line too, and we have an ally there at Munson Healthcare. Gabe is their lobbyist and wants to help us out too.
Thank you.
Hey, John, just regarding the approach and getting back to Trish, I like the idea of getting our team together, but it'd be great to have someone like Trish as a board member, and other folks, say from our committees, talking about our impact. We have our views about how we've impacted the region, but it'd be great to have some other voices weighing in as well as we develop our talking points.
I'm hoping that the folks who are also on the line can supply the stories, as Andrew and Abby said. That's key. Those committees are doing the work, so everyone's got something to say in this. Good point, David.
Hi, I'm Lou Gamalski. I'm with Harm Reduction Michigan, and we've made a huge impact with access to naloxone through those newspaper style boxes. And I mean, we've got over 100 of them out in Michigan now. And RCORP, NMORC has been supporting and helping us get those out there. This is the kind of thing that the #1 goal for the state, as I understood it from the most recent Rural Health Summit, was increased access to naloxone and education about xylazine, and so we're doing that, and so supporting ongoing trainings in communities in town hall fashion. We had great resistance in this little rural town called Wellston, which is south of Manistee, in Manistee County. Some elderly ladies who get together and knit and crochet wanted to know if I would come out and tell them about Narcan and what the point was. And I said, yes. Well, then they got the township involved to try to use that facility, and they went completely ape and wanted to charge me to come out. And so anyway, the point is, it eventually, they let me do the training. It was amazing. We had good number of people show up, and the next thing you know, we got a call. We want a naloxone distribution box at this location in Wellston. The combination of one tactic with another tactic to increase education and decrease stigma, combined with the resource, these are the stories that we want to tell, because we just got word that from our Midland guy, that, hey, there were some ODs in Midland, and they were reversed with Narcan from our box. And so these are the kinds of stories that really, it's not just the one person who overdosed, it's the whole family and generations. So I'm hoping that I think that's what you're talking about, right, Andrew?
Exactly right. That's what members are going to leave remembering. That's what they'll tell folks that they have other meetings with. Like, that's what resonates.
Lou, if you don't tell that story, we're all going to be really disappointed in you.
I'm going to tell it. I got a
All
big
right.
mouth.
We're 10 past the hour. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Abby. Remember, you can send any questions to them via email, and we will get the slide deck out. And this has been recorded, and we'll talk about how we can use it at our consortium meeting on the 8th. So thank you, everyone. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Take care.
you.